All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Start off with who I am. Well, I'm going on. It'll be before too long. 2 years in Brave. Uh, name's Max Dawntrader. Pretty much importing's become my primary income stream because I'm a filthy casual player, and it is an absolutely great way to make your ISK work for you, even if you're not right here playing Eve. You can't always be spinning a VNI as much as you'd like to try. So sometimes you need more money to blow up ships. Importing does it for me, and it can for you too. I also, because of that, and because of my want to be at the dojo, I'm also the guy that now is in charge of bringing in all the skill books for the skill book library. If you've made a request, as Nuke, you just did. So some of you might be wondering, what is importing? Well, pretty much it's buying modules, ammo, all kinds of goods from high-sec market hubs and bringing them down to Catch or Impasse and relisting them in our market hubs at a slight markup so you can make some money for your trouble to stock the market. And you would do this both to help the Alliance. It's a real pain in the butt when you're trying to fit a ship right as a fun fleet starting or there's a strat up and we only have 6 T2 railguns of that size available and you need 7 for your Ferox or something. So it helps everyone and you can turn a profit while doing it. And like I said, it's passive ISK, which is always great. But most importantly, unlike something like spinning a VNI or Explo or any of the other various ways you might make money in EVE, it scales with wealth. The more you do it, the more money you have, the more you can put back into it. You can start buying more and more, importing more and more, and it continues to grow with you, which can't be said about a lot of the other ways to make money in EVE. So it's actually a very good way to go about making your money work for you. So what do you need to start? Well, not a whole lot. The biggest I would say is patience. It's a slow process. Unlike the other methods, it's not I killed a rat, game give me money. You're going to be buying things and putting them on the market, and you have to wait until someone needs it and buys it and hope that yours was the cheapest order so that your order was the one they bought from, and a whole lot of other factors that it's not instantaneous cash like some of the other ways to go about getting ISK. You have to get used to having a cash flow if you're going to especially use it as your primary source of income, because you're going to have to invest this money and wait for a return. That brings us to another need. You need starting capital. You have to look at your wallet and make the decision, how much money am I going to spend and invest in making this happen? More the better. Like I said, it scales. So if you use more starting capital, it's a bigger percentage you get to charge, that you're making. If I put a 30% profit margin on a set of items, well, if I invested $1 million, that's, 30,000. Right, am I doing that math right? No, 300,000.
300,000.
Zeros, man. Tell you. 300,000. Versus if it's 10 million, well, then it's 3 million. So it scales, and the more you can invest, the more you get returns. And lastly, the final thing you're going to really need is a spreadsheet. There's always the joke that EVE is spreadsheets online, and if you get at all into industry or the market or importing, it is absolutely true. Doesn't have to be fancy, especially as you get started, but you need to be able to track the cost and how many of each thing you brought in so that you can be able to tell, am I making money or not? What do I need to charge to be making money? So you're going to need a spreadsheet at a minimum to be able to keep track of costs and what you imported. So now there's often, when you talk about importing, the question is, well, what on earth do I start with? Which really is a great question for it. And the answer is, it really depends. some of the sage advice that people always give is, what's something you're always buying from the market and you find it's not always there? Start with that. That there's clearly demand, even if some of it's yours. There's also a stock tool that you can use if you're trying to do doctrine items. They're very high demand because they're a doctrine that the Alliance uses. So there's always the people buying these items, but there's lots of competition as well. So you might not have as much margin as if you do your own research into items and find things to use. That stock tool can be found if you hit the plus stock command in Slack, or I think I have a link. In Dojo, I just posted it if you're in there. So it's pretty much the buyback.space/#/doctrine. And that's going to give you the doctrine stock of what's available and what's needed. That's one way to find it. And lastly, there's, of course, you can just look at the market tool. Pick any T2 or meta item. You'll want to avoid T1 items because they can be manufactured very cheaply. So you're generally going to get undercut and it's not really worth it. But T2 items or meta items that are a pain to manufacture and source the materials for, you're going to have a good run of it. Now, things to look for when you're looking at an item: how many get sold? Is there demand? What's the availability like? So to just give you an example, if you guys want to open your market windows, now I'm doing this in Catch, so if any of you are listening from Impasse, this is going to be slightly different information, and I apologize for that. But you can search for Medium Energy Neutralizer 2 in your market window. And you'll click on it, and where it says View Details, you'll click that. And it'll show two tabs, Market Data and Price History. Well, the first one, Market Data, shows that, well, there's only, what do we got? 14 and 3, 17 available in station for sale. There's others available elsewhere in Catch, but when you're fitting up a ship right away, trying to do it here in Soda Factory, you're not going elsewhere. You want it right here, right now. So there's not tons of them available, especially if we click Price History, that other tab at the top. You see that there's pretty good demand. There's several sold a day. Most days. It looks like there's only 2 gaps in my days is this going back? That's about a month. Yeah, in a month's time, there were 2 days where there was a gap. So pretty good demand. If you bring those in, you would definitely be selling them fairly steadily. And that's just really the kind of stuff you're looking for, is how many people are selling, how many do they have up for sale, and then compare that to, well, how many are sold a day. If there's only 17 on market, but there's multiple a day selling, there's not a lot in comparison, and you could bring them in and make some money. And this is just an example. You're going to have to really get into it and do research yourself, mainly because if I were to tell you everything, you'd all jump on the same ones and no one would make money. But an example, most T2 stuff, you can find niches like that where there's availability missing and you can make some money. That brings us to the next part. How do we get this stuff to the market? Starts out with, like I said, we're bringing this in from HiSec because there's a much higher concentration of this. It's where all the market hubs are. So generally speaking, you use a JITA alt or a tune, as it's called, if you're not familiar with the terms. That just means on each account you have 3 characters, so you can use one of your character slots on your main account to roll up another character and go stick them in JITA or HEC or Dodixie, some market hub, MR, and you'll give them money from your main account, You can send money. That's a thing you can do in game. And then you will use that character in that market hub to buy the items that you've researched and decided I'm going to import these. Once you do, you then need to get it to a BLT. That's Brave Little Toaster is the company. It's our Jump Freighter Corp for the Alliance. They have hub systems where they will take it and put your stuff in a jump freighter and bring it down for a very reasonable fee to catch or impasse wherever you want to sell it. And I have here, I think I have links for that. If you'll bear with me a moment, I'll put these in Dojo. So that one's for BLT Freight. They're going to be the jump freighters. Now, the two high-sec ones that they will service that you can use are Mendori or Ammar. So if you're put a market alt in Ammar, you don't have to move it anywhere. You just contract it straight to BLT and have them send it to GE or PZMA, wherever you're sending it in Brave Space. But if you do, let's say in JITA, for your market alt to buy your stuff, you're going to have to move it. So how do I move it through HiSec from JITA to Mendori? Well, there's a couple ways. There is a Brave affiliated freight service called Trinity X Industries, or TXI. Get that link for you. So that's TXI, and they have flat rates for making runs for things like JITA to Mendori. And then once it's in Mendori, again, you use BLT to put your stuff in a jump freighter and send it on down to catch or impasse. You can also use public couriers. The big thing there is they are much cheaper, but you need to really be sure to correctly collateralize your contracts if you do that. Because otherwise you will be out of money if they decide that it's much more worth it for them to just take your stuff, or if they get blown up. So collateralization is usually it's the value of the items you buy, and you're going to add 10% generally is enough. And that goes really anytime you're using a courier contract. Be sure to properly collateralize, but especially so if you're using public ones. So now we need to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to have this stuff, and once it gets down here, that's great. How do I figure out what to sell it for? Well, you have to first figure out how much did it cost me. And, well, yeah, sure, you bought it from the market, and that's a cost. But then you had to pay money to get it down here. BLT charges a fee, TXI charges a fee, or you're going to have to pay a fee to a public courier. So how do I figure that in? There are a few ways to do it. I generally figure out what was my total shipping cost. Yep, I will relink BLT for you. Basically, I figure out my total shipping cost, the BLT plus my public courier, and then I look at the total volume that I'm importing, and I divide that cost by the total volume. So my total shipping cost by total volume to get an amount of ISK per meter cubed of stuff. Then I'm going to add that per meter cubed to each item that I'm importing. So each item has a volume. Most small modules are 5 meters cubed. If you start moving up, there's 10 and 20 meter cubed items. Ammunition's really small. You're talking decimal meter cubes. It can get a little wonky, especially if you're mixing things like ammo and other modules, but for the most part, works out okay to just multiply by the volume of the item and add that cost to how much it costs you to buy that item, and that's how much per unit that item cost. So then what I do, once I figure out that unit cost for each module or ammo, whatever the item is, that unit cost of how much I bought it for plus shipping. That's when I add a margin. 20% generally gets it done for most things. If it's really low on stock and you don't want it to all get bought out immediately, you might go a little higher, 30 or 40%. If it's something really blingy, like an officer mod or something really expensive, you might even go higher. Sometimes I go as high as 50 or 60 if it's something that's very expensive and, you know, it's going to take up a lot of the collateral room in my contract. The important part is don't blue fuck. If it's a doctrine item, don't go listing it for a 60% markup. You're not doing anyone a favor then, and you look like the ass. So have some smarts about it. But you are free to price it however. Add that margin for your trouble for taking the time to figure out how to stock the market. You did your research. Pay yourself for it. Often with pricing too, you come into the question of market PVP. Is 0.01 ISKing to make sure my order is always the cheapest and the first one bought from really worth it? You'll get varying opinions. It really depends. Down in nullsec, in catch and impasse with us, I don't like to. My stuff sells anyway. I make my money. I list it for the 90 days maximum and forget it. And if it doesn't all sell, well, then I worry about adjusting the price. But you do you. If you feel that it's worth it, go for it. In the end, you're making the money either way. So then how do you track success? How do I know if it's working? It can be hard to tell sometimes because your money is cycling in and out. You know, while you're selling things, you're also buying ships that get blown up, or maybe you start an industry job and you need to buy things. So how do you tell? Well, like I said, spreadsheets. You have to trust that, you know, your calculations are correct and you're going to have a profit. I like to personally project with each order what my estimated profit's going to be, and then I kind of have an idea of, all right, well, until I do another order or until I do something else to make money, you know, go mining or an industry job or something, to try not to spend that projected profit. Because if I spend more than that, I'm technically losing money, especially if, for me anyway, it's really my only main income source. So you got to kind of keep track because you're going to have a cash flow and it's going to get hard to know, am I actually making money unless you're keeping track of it. There's other things you could go into. You know, you could get into specifics of, you know, things like, are there tools? You could get into specifics of how and what you might actually like to include in a spreadsheet. But for a 101 class, and if it's something that you're actually just trying out to see, do I even like doing this? Is this kind of a thing that's for me? I think that's kind of going above and beyond. Feel free, of course, to, if you have those kinds of questions, ask them always, whether it be now, later. You can find me on Slack. But generally speaking, I like to leave that out of Importing 101 just because, well, maybe you don't really know if this is for you yet, and that's kind of really like a tool for delving further in. So really, to kind of sum it up, the keys to importing are to find your target items. Like I said, that's generally going to be T2 stuff or meta items that you can't really actually produce. Those are good target items to look into. Avoid T1 stuff. If you have the ISK to invest in more expensive modules, some what's referred to as bling, you can import some of them, and they tend to do well, and you can put a higher margin on them. You're going to purchase it all in a high-sec market hub and then transport to Mandori or Amar so that you can have Brave Freight, BLT, ship things down in a jump freighter, and you then import it with that to your desired Brave market hub. You're going to have in a spreadsheet figured out your projected price of what it's going to be at a markup and list it at that, and the money starts rolling in slowly but surely. Some additional just kind of tips. take some risks. Stock something that isn't currently there, even if data is a little sparse. See if it sells. Don't put all your eggs in one basket with that, but if there's none there, there's no one to put up, to buy it to be able to tell. So try it out. Like I said, keep track of what sells, but also what you import. If it's something that sells a lot and you see that you're really maybe one of just either yourself or a handful of people putting up orders, it might be beneficial to say, I'll keep bringing those in if they're selling well. So keep track of what sells when you bring it in and what doesn't, so maybe you know to avoid it in the future. Most importantly, do not use all of your ISK as your capital. You need to leave a reserve because, like I said, this is a game of patience. You're not, getting ratting ticks here. It's not immediate, here's money. It's a lot of upfront cost. So don't use all of your ISK, or you're going to be sitting there blowing up your last ship and going to Dojo saying, please, sir, can I have another ship? I'm out of ISK. So be sure to be comfortable with the amount you choose to use as your starting capital. That's not to say that you have to have hundreds of millions of ISK. This is something you can do. I only had 10 million to throw at it when I started, and I've turned it into billions now. So you can absolutely start with little, but you need to be comfortable with the amount that you're using for it. And like I said, it's kind of other side of that same coin. Don't use all of your profit as you're spending cash either. Otherwise, you're not ever actually going to get ahead in the game. And you want to be able to scale this eventually if it's something that you see you like to do. So you're going to want to be able to roll some of that profit back into actually investing, not just spending on new ships and things. Additionally, if you like it and intend to keep with it, you're going to want to train up skills that let you list more orders, because eventually you're going to wind up hitting a wall that isn't ISK or isn't finding items, but is actually you ran out of market slots. So that would be the skills trade and wholesale would be the first two in the chain to start expanding your market order capability. And that's helpful because the more orders you can put up, the more diverse you can be, the more items, just sheer, types of items you can put up, is the more cash flow you have. The more statistically possible it is someone buys from you. Think that wraps it up. That's been 23 minutes of me rambling at you about how to import and the very basics. If you guys have any questions, please feel free. Whether it be now or if you want to hit me on Slack, send me an email. All of it's Max Dawnshredder. Feel free. Thanks for listening, guys.